The spacious workshop bustled with its usual hum of activity. Machinery clicked softly, and the faint scent of pine wafted through the air as someone unpacked a box of holiday decorations. Eli stood near the central workbench, her silver hair catching the glow of a nearby enchanted lamp. She waved a string of twinkling lights in the air like a banner of victory. "We're doing this," Eli declared with a determined gleam in her violet eyes. "The workshop needs a proper Christmas makeover." Darren, leaning against a nearby counter with his signature smirk, raised a brow and then grinned. "Finally, some holiday cheer. Let's make this place festive enough to melt even Gunner's frosty exterior." Across the room, Gunner crossed his arms, his cybernetic fingers tapping against the metal armrest of his chair. His one visible blue eye narrowed as he surveyed the growing pile of tinsel, ornaments, and— was that a Santa hat? "This is a workshop," Gunner said in a gruff tone, "not some department store display." "Oh, come on, Gunner." Darren grabbed the Santa hat and strode over with theatrical flair. "This has your name written all over it." Before Gunner could protest, Darren plopped the red hat onto his head. It tilted slightly to one side, the fluffy white pom-pom dangling precariously. The entire room froze for a beat. "Perfect!" Darren exclaimed, clapping his hands together like a kid on Christmas morning. "Now all you need is a beard." Eli snorted as she flicked her wrist, sending a strand of lights floating up to the rafters. "We can make this work. Think glowing runes on the walls, floating ornaments near the ceiling. Classy, magical, festive." "Or," Ashley cut in from the corner, adjusting her tactical gloves, "we stick to the basics. You know, a tree, some lights, maybe a wreath. Let's not give the wolves an excuse to chew up enchanted ornaments." As if on cue, Omega barreled into the room, his tail wagging furiously. He skidded to a stop near the decoration pile and dove headfirst into a box of garland. Moments later, the young wolf emerged, his head tangled in sparkling tinsel, his mouth proudly holding a plush reindeer toy. "Omega, no!" Clara called out as she rushed over to untangle him. The wolf let out a playful bark, the reindeer squeaking loudly in his grip. Alpha padded in after him, his massive form moving with a regal air. He gave Omega a pointed look, then turned his sharp yellow eyes toward Gunner as if to say, "This is your fault." "This is already going well," DeSera said dryly, stepping in from the training grounds and brushing snow from her jacket. She eyed the Santa hat perched on Gunner's head. "Nice touch." Jewel entered next, carrying a tray of steaming mugs. "Hot cocoa, anyone? Thought we could use a bit of fuel for this operation." She chuckled as Omega attempted to drag the entire box of ornaments toward the door, only for Beta to block his path with a low growl of disapproval. Okay, Eli said, clapping her hands for attention. "Let's get organized. Darren, Ashley, you handle the tree. Clara, keep the wolves from destroying everything. Gunner, you supervise." "Supervise?" Gunner echoed, pulling the hat off his head with a scowl. "You're assigning me to babysit?" "You're the alpha," Eli said sweetly, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "It's part of the job." As the team got to work, the workshop slowly transformed. Lights danced along the beams, glowing runes shimmered on the walls, and a towering evergreen tree stood in the corner, its branches adorned with a mix of traditional ornaments and magical baubles that hummed softly with energy. Despite Gunner's grumbling, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of warmth as he watched his team laughing and working together. "You know," Darren said, stepping back to admire their handiwork, "this might actually be the best Christmas we've ever had." "It's not over yet," Gunner muttered, though his tone had softened. He glanced at the decorated tree, the tangled wolves and the grinning faces of his team. "But I'll admit, it's a start." As the first snowflakes of the evening began to fall outside, the workshop glowed with light and laughter, a rare moment of peace for a team always ready for the next battle. As the lights in the workshop began to shimmer with festive warmth, the heavy front doors creaked open. Eliana and Mailorion stepped inside, their ethereal forms momentarily silhouetted by the snowy glow from outside. Eliana's serene blue eyes widened slightly as she took in the bustling scene of garland, glowing ornaments, and the massive tree standing proudly in the corner. "What is all of this?" Eliana asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and amusement. Her long silver robe swayed as she moved closer, her expression softening at the sight of Omega, proudly parading around with his reindeer toy. "This," Eli said with a wide grin, waving her arms theatrically, "is Christmas. Welcome to the season of joy, lights, and entirely too much sugar." Melorian, standing tall and composed beside Eliana, frowned slightly as he tilted his head to inspect the glowing runes along the walls. "It's vibrant," he said carefully, his piercing gaze sweeping over the decorations. "Though I fail to see the tactical purpose of hanging spheres from a tree." Darren barked out a laugh, slapping Melorian lightly on the shoulder. "Tactical? Nah, it's not about strategy. It's about fun. You know, letting loose. Try it sometime." "Fun?" Mylorian repeated, his tone skeptical. His brow furrowed further when Alpha, with his usual imposing presence, padded past him and paused to sniff at the edge of the tree. The dire wolf's sharp yellow eyes flicked up toward the elf, almost as if daring him to comment. Eliana moved closer to the tree, her expression softening as she reached out to touch one of the magical ornaments. The bauble glowed faintly under her fingertips, its soft hum resonating with her innate connection to magic. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "But what is its purpose?" "The purpose," Eli explained, stepping beside her, "is to bring people together. Christmas is about family, friends, and making things bright in the darkest time of year." "And presents," Darren added with a grin, holding up a candy cane. "Lots of presents." Eliana smiled faintly, her gaze drifting to the glowing runes along the beams. "It's strange," she admitted, "but it's comforting. Alfheim has its own winter festivals, but this feels more personal." "It is," Eli said. "And part of the fun is making it your own, which, by the way, means you two need to join in." She thrust a handful of tinsel toward Melorian, who looked at it as though it might attack him. "I fail to see how this enhances the functionality of your workspace," he said, holding the tinsel at arm's length. "Oh, it doesn't," Eli replied with a smirk. "But it makes it look amazing, and that's the point." Melorian sighed deeply, his usual regal composure faltering slightly as Omega trotted up to him, the tinsel now tangled in the wolf's fur. The young wolf sat down proudly, looking up at the elven guardian as if presenting him with a great honor. "It appears the wolf disagrees with me," Mylorian said dryly, gingerly removing the tinsel from Omega's neck. "He's got good taste," Darren quipped. "Come on, Mylorion, even you've got to admit this is better than all that stoic elf stuff." Eliana chuckled softly as she moved to help untangle the garland from the other side of Omega. "Perhaps," she said, her voice gentle, "though I suspect Melorian is more accustomed to celebrations with fewer distractions." "Distractions?" Darren said, mock-offended. "This is the height of Christmas cheer." Mylorion gave a long-suffering sigh but finally relented, draping a strand of tinsel over a nearby chair. "If it pleases you," he said, his tone resigned but not unkind. As the evening continued, the two elves found themselves drawn into the festive chaos. Eliana helped Eli place glowing baubles along the higher rafters, her magic enhancing their gentle light, while Mylorion eventually took a seat near the fire, watching the pack with a mix of bemusement and reluctant admiration. "You mortals," Mylorian said at one point, addressing Gunnar, who was supervising with his usual stoic air, "have an uncanny ability to find joy, even in the smallest things." Gunnar glanced at the elves, then at his team, who were laughing and joking as they worked together. He gave a small nod, his expression softening. "It's what we fight for," he said simply. Eliana, standing beside Melorion, smiled gently. Perhaps, she said, there's something to be learned from their resilience. As the snow fell softly outside, the workshop glowed with warmth, laughter, and the unlikely but growing bonds between its inhabitants. It was, as Eli had said, the start of something magical. The next morning, the workshop hummed with anticipation. Snow blanketed the grounds in a soft, pristine layer, and inside, the pack prepared to introduce Eliana to the full magic of an Earth Christmas. The air smelled of pine, cinnamon, and freshly baked cookies as the elves and humans gathered around the decorated tree. Eliana stood near the fireplace, her silver hair catching the warm glow of the flames. Her serene blue eyes sparkled with a rare curiosity as she observed the team bustling around her. Though she had witnessed the beginnings of the transformation the night before, today she was fully immersed in the experience. Eli held up a strand of blinking lights, a mischievous grin on her face. All right, Eliana, this is where the real magic happens. Blinking Christmas lights. Eliana tilted her head, her gaze following the rhythmic flashes of red, green, and blue. They're enchanting, she admitted, though her tone was hesitant. Do they serve a purpose beyond decoration? Not really, Darren interjected, tossing a shiny bauble into the air and catching it with ease. But they look cool, right? Eliana's lips curved into a faint smile as she watched the team string the lights around the massive tree. I suppose there is beauty in such simplicity. She reached out and placed a delicate hand-carved wooden ornament on a high branch, her touch making it glow faintly. The others paused to admire the effect. Okay, Eli said, holding up a star, but this goes on top. Eliana, I think it's only fair you do the honors. With a small nod, Eliana lifted the star with her slender hands. Her magic flared gently, carrying the star to the top of the tree, where it settled with a radiant glow. The team broke into cheers, and Eliana turned to them, her expression softening further. It is beautiful, she said, her voice quiet but sincere. In the kitchen, Bianca took charge, her hands deftly kneading dough as she explained the art of cookie making to Eliana. It's all about love, Bianca said, sprinkling flour onto the counter, and a little patience. Eliana watched closely, her elegant fingers mirroring Bianca's movements. In Alfheim, we prepare feasts for our winter festivals, but this seems more personal. That's because it is, Bianca said, smiling warmly. Here, we bake cookies for family, friends, and sometimes Santa. Eliana paused, her expression thoughtful. This Santa, is he a guardian of some kind? Darren, who was snacking on leftover dough, snorted. Depends who you ask. To kids, he's a jolly guy with a beard who delivers presents. To adults, he's a reason to eat way too much and buy stuff we don't need. But the spirit behind it, Eli interjected, handing Eliana a cookie cutter shaped like a snowflake, is about giving. It's about thinking of others and sharing joy. Eliana pressed the cutter into the dough, her movements careful and precise. That, she said softly, is something I can appreciate. Later, the team gathered in the lounge, the fire crackling as Eli flipped through channels. All right, Eliana, she said, stopping on a holiday movie. Welcome to the world of Hallmark Christmas movies. Prepare for predictable plots, small-town charm, and way too many snowball fights. Eliana settled into a chair, her expression skeptical but intrigued. As the movie unfolded with its tale of a big city businesswoman finding love and Christmas spirit in her hometown, Eliana's brow furrowed slightly. Does everyone in these stories abandon their responsibilities for romance? She asked, her tone equal parts amused and puzzled. Darren laughed, tossing a handful of popcorn into his mouth. Pretty much. That's the formula. But hey, it works. Eliana tilted her head, her lips twitching into a faint smile. It's endearing, in a way. As the evening grew quieter, the team gathered once more around the fire. This time it was Gunnar who spoke, his voice steady and thoughtful. "Christmas is more than decorations and cookies," he said, his gaze resting on Eliana. "It's about remembering what it stands for, the birth of Jesus. Hope, peace, and a light in the darkness." Eliana listened intently, her expression growing solemn. "In Alfheim, our winter festivals also honour light overcoming darkness," she said, "though not in the same way. Still, I can see the importance of this story." "It's the foundation of it all," Gunnar said, "and it's why we do what we do, to protect that light." Eliana nodded, her ethereal presence seeming to glow brighter in the firelight. "Then I will honour this tradition with you." As the snow continued to fall outside, the workshop buzzed with the quiet hum of contentment. The tree sparkled, cookies cooled on trays, and the team exchanged laughter and warmth. Eliana sat with the group, her initial hesitation replaced with a quiet sense of belonging. "You've given me a gift tonight," she said softly, her gaze sweeping over her newfound friends. "Thank you for sharing your light." And as the team raised their mugs of cocoa in a toast, the workshop felt more like home than ever. The brownstone sat snugly in a quiet corner of Traverse City, its enchanted walls keeping out the chill of December. Outside, the world was transforming as Christmas lights sparkled on rooftops, storefronts, and lampposts. A fresh layer of snow blanketed the city streets, softening every sound. Inside the safe house, Caleb stood by the window, his breath fogging the glass as he took in the festive scene. "Look at this," Caleb said, his tone carrying a mix of wonder and excitement. "The whole city's lighting up. Decorations, snow, the works. It's like stepping into one of those Christmas card things." Behind him, Rose lounged on the couch, a book in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. She barely glanced up, her tone dry as ever. "Charming. Let me guess. You're about to suggest we join in on the madness?" Caleb turned, grinning. "You bet I am. We've been holed up here for weeks, Rose. It wouldn't kill us to get into the holiday spirit." Argos perched on the arm of a chair, tilted her head quizzically. "Holiday spirit? Is that like a ghost thing? Because if it is, I'm out." Caleb laughed, shaking his head. "No, Argos, it's not a ghost thing. It's about celebrating, family, friends, giving, and all that good stuff." Argos's eyes lit up at one word in particular. Giving. Like shiny things, because I'm all for that. Evelyn, seated at the dining table with her usual stack of books, raised an eyebrow. "Christmas? Really? I didn't peg you for the sentimental type, Caleb." He crossed his arms, feigning offense. "Sentimental? Nah. Practical. It's good for morale. Besides," he gestured toward the window, "look at this place. Traverse City's putting on a show. We'd be the only grumpy Scrooges not getting involved." Rose set her book down with a sigh, finally meeting his gaze. "And what exactly do you propose? Stringing lights across the brownstone? Singing carols? Don't tell me you're dragging a tree in here." Caleb's grin widened. "Now you're catching on. A tree, lights, cookies, gifts. The whole 9 yards." Argos clapped her hands, her excitement childlike. "A tree, with shiny things hanging on it. Yes, let's do that." Rose groaned, rubbing her temples. "This is ridiculous." "But fun," Caleb countered. "Come on, Rose. Don't act like you're above it all. You could use a little holiday cheer." Evelyn smirked, closing her book. It might be worth it just to see Rose try to hang tinsel. Rose glared at her but didn't respond, which Caleb took as a small victory. "All right then," Caleb said, clapping his hands. "Tomorrow we head into town, stock up on decorations, and make this place feel like Christmas." Argos beamed, already envisioning the shiny ornaments she'd pick out. Evelyn rolled her eyes but didn't argue, while Rose muttered something about wasting time before picking her book back up. As the group settled back into their routines, Caleb stood by the window again, watching the city sparkle. A satisfied smile tugged at his lips. "This is..." As Caleb turned away from the window, The brownstone seemed to hum faintly, almost as if it had been listening to their conversation. The subtle glow of the enchanted walls grew warmer, casting a golden hue that made the entire room feel more welcoming. The faint scent of cinnamon drifted through the air. Argos sniffed, her nose wrinkling slightly. Is someone baking shiny things? No? What's that smell? Evelyn glanced up from her book, frowning slightly. The house does that sometimes. It adjusts to us. You've noticed it before, haven't you? Argos shrugged. Yeah, but this is new. It's spicy. Caleb grinned, gesturing broadly. See, even the house gets it. Christmas spirit is contagious. Rose rolled her eyes but looked around suspiciously, noting how the house's enchanted lights had subtly adjusted themselves to mimic the warm glow of holiday candles. The curtains, usually a neutral grey, had taken on a rich red tone, as though even the brownstone was humouring Caleb's festive push. Rose tapped her glass against the armrest of the couch. This place has always been unnervingly intuitive. If it starts putting up garlands on its own, I'm leaving. Caleb chuckled and clapped Argos on the shoulder. All right, Shiny Seeker. You've been cooped up long enough. Let's go check out the snow. You haven't really experienced Traverse City until you've had your first snowball fight. Argos perked up, tilting her head curiously. Snowball fight? That doesn't sound shiny, but is it fun? Depends on how good your aim is, Caleb replied with a grin. Come on. The trio stepped outside into the crisp, snowy air. The streetlights reflected off the untouched snow, making the world shimmer in a way that immediately captivated Argos. She crouched low, running her fingers through the powdery surface, her eyes wide with delight. She grabbed a handful and squeezed it experimentally, only to yelp as it melted against her warm skin. It's cold! Why is it cold? Caleb burst out laughing. That's snow, Argos. It's supposed to be cold. Argos wasn't deterred. She scooped up another handful, forming a messy ball and holding it up triumphantly. Cold or not, I'm the master of shiny things, and this stuff sparkles. What do I do with it? Caleb's grin turned mischievous. You throw it, like this. Before Argos could react, Caleb lobbed a snowball that hit her squarely in the chest. She gasped, her jaw dropping as she looked at the melting snow on her jacket. You dare? Her expression shifted to one of playful menace as she scrambled to scoop up more snow. Caleb, laughing, started to run, but Argos was surprisingly fast for her size. Her first snowball hit him in the shoulder, followed by another to the back of his head. 2 points for the shiny queen, she declared. Evelyn, watching from the porch, shook her head but couldn't hide her smirk. Meanwhile, Rose stepped out with her glass of wine in hand, her demeanour unimpressed as always. What on earth are you two? Her words were cut off as a stray snowball, launched wildly by Argos, smacked her squarely in the side of the head. The impact wasn't hard, but the cold, wet mess dripping down her cheek made her freeze in place. Argos's eyes widened, and Caleb stopped mid-laugh, his face going pale. Sorry, Rose. I think that one was meant for me. Rose slowly wiped the snow from her face, her expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate calm, she set her glass of wine on the porch railing and picked up a handful of snow. Well, she said, her voice cool and dangerous, if we're playing, I'd hate to miss out. The snowball fight escalated immediately. Rose's aim was alarmingly precise, and Caleb soon found himself ducking for cover behind the car. Argos, now fully invested, was laughing maniacally as she hurled snowball after snowball at anyone who moved. Evelyn, still on the porch, watched the chaos unfold and sipped her tea. You're all insane, she muttered, though the slight twitch of her lips betrayed her amusement. By the time they trudged back inside, all three were soaked and breathless. Argos shook snow from her hood like a wet dog, grinning from ear to ear. That was the best shiny thing ever. Cold but shiny. Rose, her hair damp and her expression somewhere between annoyance and reluctant amusement, picked up her glass of wine from the railing as though nothing had happened. I'm still not decorating a tree, she announced as she stepped inside. Caleb smirked, nudging Argos. She says that now, but wait until we hang the tinsel. She won't be able to resist. The brownstones seemed to hum again as they entered, the warmth and faint scent of cinnamon welcoming them back. The house, apparently delighted by their festive mischief, had placed a tray of hot cocoa on the coffee table, complete with marshmallows and candy canes. Evelyn stared at the tray, raising an eyebrow. Now it's making drinks? That's new? Don't question it, Caleb said, grabbing a mug and plopping onto the couch. This house is clearly on Team Christmas. Argos grabbed her own mug, still buzzing with excitement. Snowball fights, sparkly houses, and free hot drinks. I think I like this Christmas thing. Rose, settling back into her chair with her wine, sipped thoughtfully, her gaze drifting to the enchanted lights overhead. We'll see, she said softly, though her tone lacked its usual bite. Gonna be good, he murmured to himself. The brownstones seemed to sense the group's need for adventure as Caleb threw out his next big idea. All right, gang, listen up, Caleb declared, clapping his hands together. We've mastered snowball fights, and the house is clearly on board with Christmas. But there's one place that really needs a holiday overhaul. Rose, curled up with her glass of wine, raised an eyebrow. If you're about to suggest the Shadow Realm bar, I might actually banish you myself. Caleb's grin widened. Bingo. Argos's ears perked up. The spooky bar with all the weirdos. Can we bring snow? Snow and shiny things. Evelyn groaned, pinching the bridge of her nose. This is a terrible idea. Rose sighed, setting her glass down. Fine, but I'm not helping. And if you think Silas will let you hang tinsel on his horns, or whatever human-side nonsense he tolerates, you're more delusional than usual. The Shadow Realm bar looked different. The moment they stepped inside the human-side entrance, the group was greeted by the sight of twinkling string lights haphazardly strung along the walls, fake garlands draped over the bar, and a crooked plastic Christmas tree perched on the edge of the counter. Every patron appeared human, their supernatural disguises blending them seamlessly with the bar's dingy, earthy atmosphere. It was clear, though, that whoever had decorated wasn't human. They had no sense of proportion or design. Caleb stopped in his tracks, his jaw dropping. They beat us to it. Argos darted ahead, poking at the plastic tree with a clawed finger disguised to look like a slim, gloved hand. This isn't shiny enough. It's sad. The bartender, a grizzled man in his mid-50s with a perpetually irritated expression, glared at them. Don't even think about touching it, he growled, slamming a glass onto the counter. Rose stepped past them, her heels clicking against the floor as she surveyed the room. Her gaze landed on Silas, the bar's manager, seated in a corner booth, his human guise as an impossibly tall, muscular man with a square jaw and piercing red eyes that could have been mistaken for oddly tinted contacts. She froze, her lips twitching as she struggled to keep a straight face. He wore a Santa hat tilted slightly askew, the pom-pom drooping to one side. Silas, she said smoothly, you look festive. Silas's deep voice rumbled as he adjusted his crisp black shirt. The patrons insisted, he said flatly, brushing non-existent lint off his sleeve. Caleb leaned toward Evelyn, whispering loudly, Does this count as a Christmas miracle? The group found a table near the center of the room, where the holiday decorations clashed hilariously with the bar's usual aesthetic. Plastic reindeer adorned with googly eyes sat next to dimly glowing potions, and a tiny train set rattled along the edge of the bar, occasionally derailing onto the floor. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her expression a mix of disbelief and amusement. This is surreal. Are those fake snowflakes falling from the ceiling? Caleb grinned, pointing upward. Snow machines. Classy touch. Argos, meanwhile, had discovered a bowl of candy canes on the table and was attempting to balance one on her nose. Humans are weird, she declared, her voice muffled by the candy cane. But this is fun. Rose, sipping her wine with a long, suffering expression, glanced around the room. Whoever did this clearly has too much time on their hands. Just then, A man dressed as a drunken Santa stumbled past, belting out a slurred version of Jingle Bells, while clutching a mug of something suspiciously glowing. Caleb's eyes lit up. Best bar ever. As the group relaxed into the chaotic atmosphere, Caleb's mischievous side took over. He spotted a sprig of mistletoe hanging precariously above the entrance to the Shadow Realm side of the bar. Grinning like a child with a prank in mind, he nudged Argos. "Hey, watch this." He darted over to the doorway, planting himself directly under the mistletoe and clearing his throat loudly. "Well, well, well, looks like I'm under the mistletoe. Any takers?" The room went silent for a moment, and then a human-like patron seated at the bar let out a booming laugh. "Careful, buddy! You might not like who steps up." Rose rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath. "Idiot!" Before Caleb could respond, Argos launched herself onto the table, holding up a sprig of tinsel. "I challenge you to a duel of shinies," she declared, pointing dramatically at the mistletoe. The entire bar erupted in laughter as Caleb tried to keep a straight face. "Shinies? I think you mean." Before he could finish, Argos flung the tinsel at him like a whip, the sparkly strands wrapping around his arm. Caleb yelped, flailing comically as the crowd cheered. Okay, you win." Evelyn shook her head, hiding her laughter behind her hand. "They're going to get us kicked out." The manager steps in. Silas finally stepped forward, his piercing eyes silencing the crowd as he towered over the group. "Enough," he said, his tone gruff. "If you're going to cause chaos, at least buy another round first." Caleb held up his hands in surrender, still grinning. All right. No more duels. But you've got to admit, this place needed a little holiday cheer." Silas's stoic expression didn't waver, but a faint, reluctant smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Out," he said, waving them toward the door. As the group gathered their things and headed for the exit, Argos turned back, clutching a handful of candy canes she had somehow pilfered from the bar. "Best night ever." Rose, shaking her head but clearly amused, followed the group out into the snowy street. "You're all insufferable, but that was oddly entertaining." The snow fell softly around them as they walked, their laughter echoing through the quiet night. Even Rose couldn't hide her small smile as the festive chaos of the Shadow Realm bar faded into the distance. The snow-covered forest surrounding the Echo Division workshop was quiet as Shade and Karina stood near the edge of the tree line, their breath visible in the crisp air. The faint sound of laughter carried from the workshop where the pack was busy with their holiday preparations, but Shade's sharp eyes were fixed on the small cabin nestled in the valley below. "This is it," Shade said, his voice low but resolute. Karina stepped beside him, her violet eyes scanning the modest home. The roof sagged slightly under the weight of the snow, and a dim light flickered in the single window. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney, but it was clear the family living there had little to spare. "They barely have enough wood to stay warm," Karina murmured, her expression softening. Shade nodded. "I overheard the sheriff in town. This family's been struggling for months. The father's out of work, the mother's been ill, and they've got 3 kids. Christmas isn't even a thought for them." Karina's jaw tightened. "Not on my watch." Back at the workshop, Shade and Karina huddled over a map in the war room. A faint light illuminated their determined faces as they quietly brainstormed. "We've got supplies," Karina said, marking off locations on the map. "Blankets, food, even toys. Eli's workshop has a stash of things she's been tinkering with." Shade smirked. "Magical toys from a technomancer? These kids are about to have the most unique Christmas ever." Karina shot him a sly grin. "And we'll make sure they never know it was us." Shade leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. "It's been a while since I've seen hope in people's eyes. Let's give them that." The workshop buzzed with holiday cheer as Karina and Shade discreetly moved through the storage areas, collecting supplies. Karina grabbed a bundle of warm blankets from the medical wing, while Shade rummaged through Eli's stash of magical gadgets, his sharp eyes lighting up at the sight of a small glowing puzzle cube. "What's this?" Shade asked, holding it up. Eli glanced over from her workstation, her silver hair catching the light. "Oh, that? It's a self-solving Rubik's Cube. I was working on enchantments for dexterity training, but it's safe for kids." "Why?" "No reason," Shade said with a faint smile, slipping it into the bag. Karina returned with a crate of non-perishable food. "That should cover meals for a few weeks," she said, setting it down with a satisfied nod. "Now we just need to deliver it." Under the cover of darkness, Shade and Karina made their way to the family's cabin. The snow crunched softly beneath their boots as they approached, their movements silent and precise. Karina held a burlap sack slung over her shoulder, its contents carefully packed to avoid making noise. Shade carried another bundle of supplies, his sharp eyes scanning the area to ensure no one was watching. "We leave everything on the porch," Karina whispered. "No one sees us." Shade nodded, his dark cloak blending seamlessly with the shadows. They worked quickly, placing the supplies in neat bundles by the door. Karina carefully laid out the toys, arranging them so each child would feel like they'd received something special. Shade tucked the blankets under the food crate, ensuring they wouldn't be buried under the snow. As they finished, Karina paused, her gaze lingering on the dim light in the cabin window. "They'll wake up to this tomorrow and think it's a miracle." Shade's expression softened. Maybe it is. The next morning, the family awoke to find their porch transformed. The children's laughter rang out as they discovered the toys, their small hands clutching the glowing puzzle cube and hand-carved figurines. Inside, the parents unpacked the food with tearful gratitude, their expressions a mixture of relief and disbelief. From a distance hidden in the tree line, Karina and Shade watched the scene unfold. Karina's heart swelled as she saw the smiles on the children's faces, their joy cutting through the cold winter morning. "We did good," Karina said softly. Shade nodded, his gaze never leaving the family. "Yeah, we did." As they turned to leave, the faint sound of a child's voice carried through the air. "Mum, look! It's like magic!" Karina smiled, her breath visible in the cold air. "Merry Christmas," she whispered, her words lost in the breeze as she and Shade disappeared into the forest. The idea of a Christmas party had been simmering in Eli and Darren's minds for days. However, there was one significant roadblock, convincing Gunnar and Clara to approve the plan, especially with Rose and her team on the guest list. Gunnar sat at the head of the long conference table, reviewing logistical reports on the screen in front of him. Clara stood nearby, arms crossed, her piercing hazel eyes scanning another set of documents. They exuded authority, the kind that made most people think twice before pitching any idea remotely frivolous. Darren, however, had no such hesitation. "All right, boss," Darren started, leaning casually against the table. "I've got a proposal for you." Gunnar's one good eye lifted from the screen. "If it involves you testing another batch of eggnog from the supply closet, the answer is no." Eli, standing beside Darren, chuckled and stepped in. "Not this time, Gunnar. We're thinking of throwing a Christmas party. Full-on celebration. Food, drinks, music. The works." Clara raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious. And what's your angle?" "No angle," Eli said with a disarming smile. "We've all been through a lot lately, and morale could use a boost. Plus, it's a chance to bond as a team." Gunnar's fingers drummed against the table. "Fine, as long as it doesn't interfere with operations." Darren grinned. "Great. Also, we want to invite a few guests." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Guests?" "Yeah," Darren said, straightening up. "Rose and her crew. Argos, Caleb, and Evelyn." The room went silent. Gunnar leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You want to invite Rose?" "And her merry band of troublemakers?" Clara added, her tone sharp. Eli stepped in, her tone measured. "Look, we've had our differences, but Rose has been cooperative lately. Besides, this could smooth over lingering tensions. Darren smirked, and nothing says truce like spiked punch and bad holiday sweaters. Gunner's expression didn't change. And what happens if this truce ends with a fight in the courtyard? We'll keep it contained, Eli promised. Rose isn't stupid enough to cause trouble on our turf, not with Eliana and Mylorion watching. Clara sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. It's risky, but it's also a chance to gauge where they stand. Fine, I'll back this. But if anything goes sideways, you're cleaning it up. Darren gave a mock salute. Deal. Gunner's gaze hardened. And if Rose so much as looks at anyone the wrong way, the party's over. Understood, Eli said, her smile triumphant. The enchanted brownstone stood quietly on a bustling Traverse city street, its charm blending seamlessly into its surroundings. Darren and Eli approached the door, the faint sound of holiday music spilling out from the nearby shops. Darren knocked twice. The door opened a crack, revealing Rose's sharp, dark eyes. Well, well, Rose drawled, her gaze narrowing. To what do I owe the pleasure? Or, should I say intrusion? Relax, Rose, Darren said, holding up his hands. We're here with an olive branch. Rose's gaze flicked between them suspiciously. I'm listening. We're throwing a Christmas party, Eli explained, and we want you and your team to come. Rose opened the door, fully leaning against the frame. A Christmas party? With you lot? Don't act so surprised, Darren said. It's not like you've never crashed a party before. Fair point, Rose replied, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. And how exactly did you find my place? Darren's grin widened. Wouldn't you like to know? And no, I didn't need a tracker this time. Rose's smirk faded into a glare. Charming as ever, Darren. It's a gift, he quipped. Argos appeared behind Rose, her golden eyes lighting up. Did someone say party? Yep, Darren said. Food, drinks, and all the shiny decorations your heart desires. Argos's grin widened. I'm in. You're not invited yet, Rose said sharply, but her tone lacked its usual bite. Evelyn appeared next, her expression curious but guarded. What's the catch? No catch, Eli said. Just a chance to relax and enjoy the season. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Rose studied them for a long moment, then sighed. Fine. We'll come. But if this is a trap... It's not, Eli assured her. Good, Rose said, stepping back. Because if it were, I'd make sure that tracker was the least of your worries. Darren winked. Can't wait. Rose's heels clicked sharply against the brownstone's hardwood floor as she entered the main room, her team already scattered across their usual spots. Evelyn sat perched on the edge of a chair, flipping through an ancient tome, while Caleb lounged lazily on the couch. Argos was on the floor, balancing a candy cane on her nose like it was some great feat of dexterity. All right, Rose began curtly, holding up the folded invitation. Echo Division wants us to join their little Christmas gathering. Argos perked up immediately, her nose still tilted toward the candy cane. Ooh! A party! Are there shinies? Focus, Argos, Rose snapped, but there was no real bite in her tone. This isn't just a party. It's a play. A play for what? Caleb asked, sitting up. Eggnog diplomacy? To test us, Rose replied. To see how much we're willing to let our guard down. They'll be watching everything. How we interact with them, with the pack, with those wolves. The word came out like a curse, her distaste palpable. Evelyn closed her book, setting it carefully aside. That's not entirely unreasonable. After all, we're still outliers in their eyes. Outsiders. They're just as wary of us as we are of them. Doesn't mean we have to dance to their tune, Rose countered, especially not with their guard dogs prowling around. Argos frowned, her enthusiasm dimming for the first time. Yeah, those wolves are big and sharp and scary. Caleb smirked, leaning back. Oh, come on. They're not that bad. It's just a matter of keeping your distance and not smelling like fear. Great advice, Caleb, Rose said dryly. Maybe you can share it with Argos when one of those wolves decides she looks like lunch. Hey, Argos protested. I'm sparkly, not snacky. Evelyn suppressed a small smile. While the wolves are an obvious concern, Rose, you must admit this invitation has potential. If we go, we'll gain valuable insights into their dynamics, how the pack operates, their weak points. And if it's a trap? Rose asked sharply. It's not, Evelyn replied, her tone calm but firm. Echo Division doesn't play games like that. They're too straightforward. And too boring, Caleb muttered, earning a glare from Rose. Rose paced the room, her heels echoing like a clock ticking down. I don't like this. It's too much risk for too little gain. Too little gain, Caleb said, grinning. Come on, Rose. Free food, free drinks, and a chance to watch Darren make a fool of himself? Sounds like a win to me. Rose didn't dignify that with a response. She glanced back at Evelyn, who met her gaze with quiet resolve. Finally, she sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing, if only slightly. Fine, Rose said. We'll go, but we're not staying long. And if those wolves so much as growl at us, we're out. Understood? Argos jumped to her feet, practically vibrating with excitement. Yes, party time. Don't get ahead of yourself, Rose warned. And for the love of everything, stay away from the wolves. Evelyn stood, brushing non-existent dust from her skirt. We'll tread carefully, Rose. This could be an opportunity to level the playing field. Caleb hopped off the couch, stretching lazily. Level the playing field or not, I'm just here for the eggnog. Argos, Rose added as the group began to disperse. If I catch you trying to decorate a wolf, there will be consequences. Argos froze, her mouth open in protest. But… No buts, Rose said sharply. Let's see if we can get through this without embarrassing ourselves. As the team prepared to head out, the brownstone's enchanted walls seemed to hum faintly, echoing Rose's lingering unease. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf's low growl seemed to reverberate through the snowy evening. The familiar rumble of Caleb's SUV cut through the crisp evening air as it pulled into the snow-covered driveway of the Echo Division workshop. The vehicle had seen better days, its paint chipped and tyres squeaking in protest as they rolled to a stop. Rose sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her lips pressed into a thin line as Caleb shifted into park. You really couldn't find something less embarrassing to drive? Rose asked, her tone dripping with disdain. Caleb grinned as he turned off the ignition, leaning back in his seat. She's reliable, Rose. That's more than I can say for half the junk you've dragged us around in. Reliable or not, it's a miracle we made it here without the doors falling off, Rose shot back, stepping out into the cold night. Argos poked her head between the front seats, clutching her rattling packages. I like it. It's cozy. And it has that shiny dashboard bobble thing. It's a broken compass, Rose replied curtly, slamming the door. Still shiny, Argos muttered, carefully climbing out with her arms full. Evelyn emerged from the back seat, cradling her ornate box. Perhaps we should focus less on the transportation and more on the company awaiting us. Caleb patted the SUV's hood affectionately as he walked around to join the group. She's been through worse and she'll be just fine, unlike some people's patience. Care to repeat that? Rose asked, her sharp tone daring him. Caleb held up his hands with a grin. Nothing, boss. Let's get moving before Argos drops her shiny assortment. I've got it, Argos protested, the precarious stack wobbling in her arms. Maybe. You sure this isn't a trap? Caleb asked, his breath fogging in the air as he glanced toward the glowing runes etched along the workshop's walls. If it is, we're prepared, Rose replied curtly, brushing snow off her coat. Argos balanced the packages precariously as she shuffled to Rose's side. What if it's not a trap? What if it's shiny and fun, and full of snacks? Keep your focus, Argos, Rose warned, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness. Evelyn adjusted her glasses, her voice calm. The wolves are our real concern. Keep your distance, and they'll do the same. Hopefully. Hopefully? Caleb repeated with a smirk. Great. Nothing like a little existential dread to kick off the holidays. Before heading to the door, Rose paused, her gaze flicking toward the bundles Argos carried and the ornate box in Evelyn's hands. Let's not look like fools, she said. What did we bring? Argos beamed, holding up her collection. I made these myself. I call it the shiny surprise assortment. One box has those glow-in-the-dark baubles, the other has treats wrapped in glitter paper, and this one, she shook the last box dramatically, is full of mini wind-up snowmen. Rose stared at her for a long moment. They rattle. It's part of the charm, Argos replied with absolute sincerity. Perfect, Caleb said, slinging a sack over his shoulder. I brought some bottles. Whiskey, brandy, and eggnog. You know, the essentials. Let's loosen them up a bit. Evelyn held up her own contribution, an elegantly wrapped box containing a set of enchanted silver bells. These resonate at a frequency meant to calm hostile entities. Consider it both a gift and insurance. Rose arched an eyebrow. How festive. What about you? Caleb asked, gesturing toward Rose's empty hands. I'm the one bringing all of you, Rose shot back. That's enough of a gift. The heavy wooden doors to the workshop creaked open, and warm light spilled out into the cold night. Eli stood at the entrance, her silver hair glinting in the light of the glowing runes. She smiled brightly, waving them inside. You made it, Eli said, her violet eyes sparkling. Come on in. We're just getting started. Caleb stepped forward, offering his most charming grin. What's the dress code? Holiday casual or try not to get eaten by wolves? Eli laughed, stepping aside to let them enter. Don't worry, the wolves are on their best behaviour. Mostly. Argos shuffled in next, her packages rattling noisily. Do they like shiny things? Asking for a friend? Behind her, Rose entered with a measured gait, her sharp gaze scanning the room. The space was a whirlwind of festive decorations. Glowing runes shimmered along the beams, enchanted ornaments floated near the ceiling, and a massive tree stood proudly in the corner. The pack members were scattered throughout the room, but Rose's attention immediately locked onto the wolves. Alpha sat near the fire, his piercing yellow eyes fixed on her. The dire wolf's massive frame radiated power and authority, and Rose could practically feel his challenge as his gaze bore into hers. Of course he's staring, Rose muttered under her breath. He's probably thinking about last time, Caleb whispered, sidling up to her. You know, when you... Not the time, Rose snapped. Omega, sitting beside Alpha, perked up at the sight of Caleb, his tail wagging once before he bounded toward him with a playful bark. Oh no, Caleb said, backing up a step. Not this again. Omega stopped short, tilting his head as if confused. Caleb sighed, leaning down to pat the young wolf on the head. All right, fine, but no pouncing. Nearby, Argos froze as Alpha's gaze shifted to her. She clutched her packages tighter, muttering, Please don't chase me up a tree again. Evelyn, ever composed, calmly made her way to a quiet corner, observing the room with a calculating eye. Beta padded into view, her sharp gaze sweeping over the newcomers before she growled softly, her protective instincts on high alert. Rose squared her shoulders and met Alpha's gaze head-on, refusing to look away. The tension in the air was palpable, but Alpha simply snorted, laying his head down as if to say, I'm still in charge here. Gunnar appeared near the tree, his cybernetic arm catching the light as he crossed the room toward them. Rose, he greeted, his tone neutral but firm. You actually came. Your invitation was persuasive, she replied. Good, Gunnar said, his gaze briefly flicking to Caleb and Argos. We'll see how long you last. Rose's eyes narrowed, but before she could reply, Eli swooped in, clapping her hands. All right, everyone, let's get festive. Drinks are by the bar, snacks are on the table, and Darren is about to start his unique rendition of Christmas carols. As Darren's off-key singing filled the room, the tension eased slightly, though Rose and her team remained on edge. The wolves watched them carefully, and the pack members cast occasional curious glances their way. Caleb leaned over to Evelyn, a grin tugging at his lips. Well, this is off to a great start. Evelyn sipped her tea, her expression unreadable. It'll be memorable, at least. The workshop buzzed with activity, the festive decorations casting a warm glow over the gathering. Caleb stood by the snack table, casually sipping from his mug of eggnog, as he kept an eye on Darren and Rose at the centre of the room. The two were locked in a spirited exchange of words, the tension palpable. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Rose said, her tone icy but razor-sharp. Darren leaned back lazily against the edge of a table, his signature smirk firmly in place. "Not clever, just observant. Like noticing how you keep glancing at the wolves." Rose's glare could have melted steel. "I'm watching my surroundings. You'd know what that's like if you paid attention to anything other than your own ego." Across the room, Caleb nudged Eli, his grin widening as he pointed toward the verbal sparring match. "Keebler, you catching this? I think Darren's finally met his match." Eli, perched on the arm of a chair with a mug of her own, glanced over. Her violet eyes sparkled with mischief as she noticed the faint glimmer above Darren and Rose. "Oh, this is too good." With a theatrical flourish, Caleb called out, "Hey, you two, might want to look up." Both Rose and Darren froze mid-argument, their gazes lifting to the glowing mistletoe dangling directly above them. The workshop seemed to hold its breath for a beat. Rose's expression darkened immediately. "Absolutely not." Darren's grin widened, his blue eyes twinkling with delight. "Oh, come on, Rose, it's tradition. Don't want to disappoint the holiday spirits, do you?" "Don't tempt me," she said coldly, "because I'm happy to haunt yours." Caleb burst out laughing, slapping his knee. "This is gold! Rose, you're not going to let Darren off that easy, are you?" Eli sipped her cocoa, savouring the moment. "Rules are rules," she chimed in sweetly. "And Darren, you're always telling me I don't respect traditions. Wouldn't want to be a hypocrite now, would you?" Darren shot her a playful glare. "Keebler, don't start." "Oh, I think I will," Eli said, her smirk growing. "Payback's a wonderful thing." Rose crossed her arms, ignoring the laughter rippling through the room. "If you're waiting for me to humour this nonsense, you'll be waiting all night." Darren stepped closer, his voice low but teasing. "What's the matter, Rose? Afraid you might actually like me?" "Afraid you might not walk away intact," she shot back. Caleb leaned toward Eli, his voice loud enough to carry. "Think we'll get a kiss? A fight? Or both?" Eli's grin turned devious. "Both would make my night." Darren tilted his head, his smirk softening as he took a small step back. "Relax, Rose. No one's forcing anything. Consider it a truce." He extended his hand with a mock bow. "For the holidays." Rose glanced at his outstretched hand, the corners of her mouth twitching. Whether with irritation or amusement wasn't clear. "Fine. A truce." She shook his hand briefly before adding, "But only because I don't want to ruin the party." Darren laughed as he released her hand. "See? You do have a heart." Rose turned on her heel, her tone sharp as she addressed Eli and Caleb. "Enjoy this while it lasts. The next person to mention mistletoe is getting thrown into the snow." Eli raised her mug in triumph. "Totally worth it." Caleb grinned, nudging Darren. "You survived. Barely." Darren shrugged, his grin still in place. "She's feisty. I like it." As the laughter from the mistletoe debacle subsided, the room returned to its festive hum of activity. Near the tree, Eliana stood gracefully, her long silver hair catching the glow of the enchanted lights. She had been quietly observing the exchange between Rose, Darren, and the others, a faint smile playing on her lips. Her serene blue eyes turned toward Gunnar, who was stationed near the fire, his cybernetic arm resting casually on the mantel. Eliana approached him, her steps light and purposeful. "Gunnar," she began softly, her melodic voice cutting through the noise, "I've been watching this spirited display. May I ask, What is the tradition of mistletoe? Gunnar glanced at her, his piercing blue eyes studying her for a moment before he responded. It's an old custom, he said, his voice steady and thoughtful. Goes back centuries. In human tradition, if two people find themselves under mistletoe, they're supposed to share a kiss. Eliana's brow furrowed slightly in curiosity. And why is this plant so significant? He gave a faint shrug, his expression softening. Depends on who you ask. Some say it's a symbol of peace. Warriors used to lay down their weapons if they met under mistletoe. Over time, it became tied to romance and the holidays. Eliana tilted her head, considering this. So it is both a sign of truce and affection? Gunnar nodded. Something like that. Her gaze drifted back toward Rose and Darren, who were now mingling with the others, their previous exchange lingering in the air like the faint scent of pine. It seems to stir strong emotions, she mused. Conflict, amusement, perhaps even connection. Gunnar smirked faintly, his tone dry. Yeah, it tends to do that. Eliana's smile widened as she turned back to him. And have you ever found yourself under mistletoe? His expression shifted slightly, the faintest hint of a chuckle escaping him. Can't say I've been in that situation often. Why? You planning to set me up? Her laugh was soft and musical. Not at all. But it is an intriguing tradition, one that seems to bring out the best and the boldest in people. Gunnar's eye flicked toward Rose and Darren again, his smirk returning. That's one way to put it. As she returned to her place by the tree, Eliana's thoughtful expression lingered. Though she had no personal stake in the tradition, there was something charming about the way it revealed the human heart, whether through teasing, bravery, or the simplest acts of connection. The party was in full swing, laughter and conversation filling the air. Shade lingered on the edges of the room, his form blending seamlessly with the dim corners of the workshop. He moved effortlessly from shadow to shadow, unnoticed by most, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd with quiet amusement. Near the far wall, his gaze landed on Gunnar and Eliana, who stood by the towering Christmas tree, deep in conversation. A faint smirk tugged at Shade's lips. With a silent step, he emerged briefly from the shadows, plucking a sprig of mistletoe from a decorative wreath hanging nearby. Then, just as quickly, he slipped back into the darkness, reappearing directly above the unsuspecting pair. A rare moment. Gunnar stood with his arms crossed, his cybernetic fingers tapping absently against his arm. Eliana was beside him, her ethereal presence calm amidst the lively chaos. They had been discussing Earth's winter traditions, a topic that seemed to bridge the gap between their respective worlds. I imagine these customs serve as a reminder, Eliana said softly, her blue eyes thoughtful as she gazed at the glowing ornaments. To find light in the darkest of times. Gunnar nodded, his voice low. Yeah, it's about holding on to what matters. Family, friends, purpose. He glanced at her, his expression softer than usual. Keeps you grounded. For a moment, the noise of the party seemed to fade around them, the connection between them tangible. Eliana turned to meet his gaze, a small, tentative smile gracing her lips. Gunnar, she began, her voice quieter now. There's something Look up, Shade's voice called, smooth and low from a nearby shadow. Both of them froze, their eyes lifting simultaneously to the sprig of mistletoe now dangling just above their heads. Eliana's cheeks flushed faintly, a rare break in her composed demeanour. Gunnar's brow furrowed as he glanced around, spotting the faintest hint of movement in the shadows nearby. Really, Shade? Gunnar muttered, his tone dry but not unkind. You're welcome, came the whispered reply from the shadows, followed by a chuckle. Eliana let out a soft musical laugh, her initial embarrassment fading into amusement. It seems your traditions are quite persistent. Gunnar's expression softened as he glanced back at her, his usual stoicism giving way to something warmer. Guess we can't ignore tradition, he said quietly. As they leaned in, the noise of the party faded further, the tension between them hovering on the brink of something more. Just as their lips were about to meet, a blur of grey fur barreled into Gunner's side. Omega, tail wagging furiously, let out an excited bark as he tried to squeeze himself between the two. Gunner stumbled slightly but steadied himself, looking down at the young wolf with a mix of exasperation and disbelief. Omega, he said, his tone a warning. The wolf, completely oblivious, wagged his tail harder and nudged Eliana's hand with his nose, clearly seeking attention. Eliana laughed softly, crouching to scratch behind Omega's ears. It seems he has excellent timing, she said, her voice tinged with amusement. Or terrible timing, Gunner muttered, though the corner of his mouth twitched in a faint smile. He reached down to ruffle Omega's fur, the wolf leaning happily into his touch. Nearby, Clara, who had been watching from across the room, rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath, "Classic." From the sidelines, Maelorion observed with a faint smirk, his gaze flicking briefly toward the shadows where shade lingered. A curious guardian, that one, Maelorion mused to himself. As Eliana stood, she gave Gunner a knowing look, her expression still warm. Perhaps there is wisdom in your traditions after all, she said lightly. Gunner held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. Maybe. But it seems we'll have to revisit this one later. Eliana's smile deepened, and she inclined her head. I'll hold you to that. From the shadows, Shade chuckled softly, already slipping away to his next mischief. Meanwhile, Omega sat proudly at Eliana's feet, clearly unaware of the moment he had interrupted. Amidst the festive buzz of the party, Argos perched herself on the edge of a bench near the workshop's glowing hearth, momentarily retreating from the chaos. She cradled a small plate of cookies, her bright eyes darting around the room as she observed the mingling guests. Though the celestial gem pulsed faintly against her chest, its light hidden beneath her festive scarf, she could still feel its subtle warmth, a constant reminder of its presence. Maelorion approached quietly, his imposing yet graceful form drawing only her attention. His gaze, sharp and all-seeing, softened slightly as he regarded her. Argos, he said, his voice calm yet probing. May I join you? She looked up, hesitating for a moment before nodding. Sure, I guess, if you're not here to talk about the shiny cookies I stole. A faint smile ghosted across Maelorion's lips. I assure you your cookies are safe. His gaze dropped briefly to her scarf, the faintest glimmer of the gem's glow visible beneath the fabric. I'm more curious about what you're carrying. Argos stiffened slightly, her playful demeanour faltering. What about it? She asked warily, instinctively tugging her scarf tighter. Maelorion took a seat beside her, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. The gem, he said simply. It's no ordinary artifact, is it? She hesitated, her fingers brushing the fabric where the gem lay hidden. It's complicated, she admitted finally. It used to just sit there, all quiet and sparkly, but now it's... She paused, searching for the words. It's like it's alive. I can feel it. Maelorion inclined his head, his expression thoughtful. That's because it is, in a sense. Such relics are not merely objects, they are forces, shaped by the will of those who wield them. He turned his gaze to hers, his voice gentle but firm. You've bonded with it. Its power is tied to you now. Argos blinked, the weight of his words settling over her. Bonded? Like, forever? Perhaps, Maelorion replied. The gem enhances you, yes? Your strength, your senses, your resilience, but it also reflects you, your intentions, your emotions. It is both a gift and a mirror. She frowned, looking down at her hands. It's weird. Sometimes it feels like it's helping me. Other times it's like it's trying to tell me something, but I don't know what. Maelorion studied her quietly for a moment before speaking. The gem holds secrets, Argos. Ancient ones. It is no coincidence that it awakened when you arrived here. Earth's forgotten magic resonates with it. Argos's brow furrowed. Forgotten magic? Why does everyone keep saying stuff like that? Maelorion's gaze grew distant, as if peering into something beyond the room, because the balance of power across realms is shifting. Forces once dormant are stirring. The gem is a part of that change, and so are you. She shifted uncomfortably, her playful nature giving way to uncertainty. I didn't ask for this, you know. I didn't want to be part of whatever this is. Perhaps not, Maelorion said gently. But the gem chose you, Argos. It saw something in you, a strength, a potential, that others might overlook. She snorted softly, though a flicker of warmth touched her expression. You think I'm strong? You must have hit the eggnog pretty hard. Maelorion's faint smile returned. Strength takes many forms. Yours may yet surprise even you. For a moment they sat in companionable silence, the crackle of the fire filling the space between them. Argos reached up, loosening her scarf slightly to reveal the faint, rhythmic glow of the gem beneath. Its light pulsed in time with her heartbeat, as if alive. Okay, she said finally, her voice quieter but resolute. If this thing is going to stick around, I guess I better figure out how it works. Maelorion nodded, his expression approving. A wise choice. The gem's power will grow as your understanding deepens. But tread carefully, Argos. Such gifts can draw both allies and enemies. She swallowed hard, her fingers brushing the gem. Allies would be nice for a change. You have more than you realize, Maelorion said, rising to his feet. Do not hesitate to seek their guidance. Even the brightest forces need a steady hand. As he moved back toward the crowd, Argos remained seated, her gaze fixed on the gem's faint glow. For the first time, its presence felt less like a burden and more like a challenge, one she was finally ready to face. The room settled into a warm hum as Eli clapped her hands to gather everyone's attention. All right, everyone, it's time for the gift exchange, she announced, her voice bright and filled with excitement. The guests began to gather near the glowing Christmas tree, where the gifts had been piled high in a chaotic but festive heap. The tree's enchanted ornaments shimmered in hues of silver and gold, casting a soft light over the gathered crowd. Caleb stood off to the side, holding a mug of eggnog and grinning like a kid in a candy store. This is going to be good, he muttered to Argos, who was bouncing on the balls of her feet, clearly eager to see what surprises awaited. Eli took charge, pulling names from a decorative hat. The first pairing was Caleb and Argos. Caleb handed her a shiny box wrapped in holographic paper. Argos tore into it with unbridled enthusiasm, revealing a set of brightly coloured miniature drones. Whoa! Tiny flying things, she exclaimed, already fiddling with the controls. Caleb chuckled. Figured you'd enjoy some extra shinies. They're harmless. Mostly. Argos gifted Caleb a wrapped bundle that rattled ominously. He opened it cautiously, revealing a pair of wind-up snowmen that waddled across the floor before exploding into bursts of glitter. The room erupted into laughter. Well, that's festive, Caleb said, shaking glitter from his hair. Thanks, Argos. The next pairing was Rose and Darren. Darren handed Rose a neatly wrapped box with a smug grin. She unwrapped it slowly, her expression guarded, only to reveal a sleek tactical knife with her initials engraved on the handle. Rose's eyes flicked up to meet Darren's, her lips twitching in a faint smile. Not bad, she admitted. At least you know my style. I figured you'd want something practical, Darren replied. Didn't think you were the fuzzy slippers type. Rose smirked. Not unless they come with a steel blade. Rose handed Darren a box in return. He opened it to find a custom leather holster for Thunderstrike, complete with intricate rune engravings. Now this, Darren said, admiring the craftsmanship, is a proper gift. Thanks, Rose. You're welcome, Rose said, her tone neutral, but there was a flicker of camaraderie in her eyes. Omega bounded up to Argos, dropping a small package at her feet. She blinked in surprise before opening it, revealing a chew toy shaped like a wolf. Omega barked happily, wagging his tail as if waiting for her approval. "Well, I guess I know who this is from," Argos said, holding up the toy. "Thanks, buddy." Alpha and Beta watched from a distance, their keen eyes observing the mingling groups. Though they didn't participate directly, their presence seemed less intimidating now, as if they too were warming to the strangers. Eliana and Gunnar. Toward the end of the exchange, Gunnar approached Eliana, handing her a simple wooden box. She opened it to reveal an intricately carved elven pendant, shimmering faintly with runic engravings. "It's enchanted," Gunnar said quietly. "Protection. Not that you need it, but just in case." Eliana's smile was soft and genuine as she fastened the pendant around her neck. "It's beautiful. Thank you, Gunnar." She handed him a small wrapped bundle in return. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with the symbol of the pack. Gunnar opened it to find blank pages, each faintly lined with silver threads. "It's for your thoughts," Eliana said gently. "Or plans, if you prefer." He nodded, a flicker of gratitude passing over his face. "It's perfect." As the gifts continued to be exchanged, the tension between the two teams began to dissolve. Caleb and Darren shared a laugh over the glittery snowmen, while Rose and Eli discussed the intricacies of runic engraving. Even Evelyn found herself engaged in quiet conversation with Clara about ancient artifacts. Toward the end of the evening, Maelorion raised his glass in a rare gesture of camaraderie. "To new alliances," he said, his voice resonant and steady. "And to the bonds forged tonight." The room echoed with agreement as everyone raised their glasses. For the first time, the line between the teams seemed to blur, replaced by mutual respect and the beginnings of trust. As the night wound down, the laughter lingered, a reminder that even amidst the looming threats and battles to come, there was still room for connection, hope, and light. A Christmas wish from the Echo Division team. The Christmas tree glows softly in the background, adorned with enchanted ornaments that shimmer faintly. The team is gathered, smiling and relaxed, a rare moment of peace amidst their usual chaos. Gunnar steps forward, his commanding presence softened by the warm light. "Gunnar, this year we've faced battles, loss, and challenges that tested every ounce of our strength. But we've also found hope, forged bonds, and reminded ourselves of what truly matters. As we close out the year, we want to thank all of you for standing with us." Clara, standing beside Gunnar, a faint smile on her face. Whether you're part of a pack, a team, or just finding your own way, remember this: you're stronger than you think, and you're never truly alone. Darren, leaning casually against the wall. "And hey, if the holidays get rough, just do what I do. Grab some eggnog, laugh at the chaos, and remember it could always be worse. I mean, at least you're not under mistletoe with me." Eli, smirking and nudging Darren. "But if you are, try not to take it too personally. On a more serious note, may your holidays be filled with a little magic, a lot of warmth, and enough shiny gadgets to keep even Keebler here happy." Eliana, stepping forward, her serene expression full of grace. "From Alfheim to Earth, and all the realms in between, let this season remind us of the light that endures through even the darkest times. May peace and balance guide you in the year to come." Rose, arms crossed but smiling faintly. "And for those of you like me who don't exactly thrive on holiday cheer, find your joy where you can, even if it's just seeing someone else covered in glitter." Argos, bouncing with excitement. "Oh, and don't forget to look for shinies. They're everywhere this time of year. And if anyone gives you something boring, just add glitter. Problem solved." Caleb, laughing as he raises a mug of eggnog. "Here's to surviving another year, making memories and laughing along the way. From all of us here, may your Christmas be as epic as Darren's singing, but, way more in tune." Shade, emerging from the shadows with a faint smirk. "And if you ever feel lost, remember, there's always a way back to the light. even if you have to take a shortcut through the shadows. My Alorian, his voice calm and steady, may this season bring clarity, purpose, and the strength to face whatever lies ahead. Trust in the connections you've built. They will carry you through. Omega, Alpha, and Beta, with Omega bounding up to the camera, wagging his tail and barking happily. Woof! The camera pans back to show the whole group together, with Gunnar speaking one last time. Gunnar, from all of us here in Echo Division and beyond, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Stay strong, stay safe, and remember, you're part of this story too.